Hi, everybody. My name is Isabella Charlton, and some people have been asking me what happened with a kitten and the Austin Humane Society. I had possibly the worst experience of my life with the Austin Humane Society. They killed my kitten, Roosevelt, and honestly, it was probably like the worst few days of my life. What's more important that it was the worst few days of a kitten's life. It was such horrible suffering, needless suffering for a tiny little kitten that had relied on me and relied on the people around it to look after it, and it was completely failed. So I just wanted to talk about that. I've had I've had a lot of communication with the Austin community. I've had some communication with the Austin Humane Society, and they've generally been very unhelpful, very defensive, and they agreed to give me an apology, and that was it, but not admit any liability. So, and then they promised to make a lot of changes, and then they backtracked on all that. They hired a very expensive lawyer to negotiate these supposed changes, and then just basically decided to do nothing. It's been a very hard process trying to deal with the Austin Humane Society, because I honestly did believe going in that they wanted to help animals and that they cared about animals, but really they care about their sponsorship, just making money, their reputation. I don't think maybe they care about animals in very broad terms, in terms of like this percentage. But in terms of individual animals, they are very callous, I would say. So I guess I should start at the beginning. At the beginning of September 2021, someone asked me to go and rescue this tiny little kitten. So I went to check it out. It was underneath a restaurant, and I could see immediately, oh, this would be very difficult to catch this little kitten. And I have a lot of experience catching cats and kittens. I used to work in trap neuter return in Beijing, where I partnered with a local vet, and we worked together and probably ended up doing trap neuter return for over 20 cats. And so I had a lot of experience doing it. Anyway, but this kitten was very young, so obviously this wouldn't be a trap neuter return situation. It would be a catch the kitten, see if it's friendly enough. It's very young, so likely it could become friendly enough if you spent time with it, and then foster it, and then hopefully find a home for it. So the person that asked me to go and catch this kitten, they said, well, what do you want to do with it? And I said, oh, you'd need to foster it, and then we'd find a home for it, and they agreed. So I initially assessed the situation and saw, okay, the only way to catch this kitten is with a cat trap. So I looked online and I saw the Austin Humane Society had cat traps that they would lend to people with quite a large deposit, but I was happy to do that. So I went there and I picked up a cat trap, and I spoke to a lady working there, and they seemed perfectly pleasant and helpful. A little bit jaded for some reason. I did get that impression. And so I took the cat trap and I caught the kitten. And it was just very tiny, delicate kitten. I could tell like it wasn't going to survive long on its own. And it did seem to be completely on its own. No evidence of any other kittens or any mother cat in the area. It did have the beginnings, even though it was very underweight, it did have the beginnings of little teeth, so it could eat food. And I caught it in a trap where it ate food. So it was able to be away from its mother. Not that there was any mother in the vicinity. I think they'd probably been separated by that point. Anyway, so I caught this kitten with the cat trap from Austin Humane Society, and I called the person who asked me to do it, and I said, okay, I've got the kitten, so I'll take her to your house to be fostered. And then suddenly he changed his mind. He said, no, I don't want it in my house. And I was like, okay, that's a very difficult situation for me, because I was just in Austin on work. So immediately I really assessed my options, and I decided, okay, I'm going to have to get an Airbnb to look after this kitten myself, because I've been put in this situation. And to be honest, I love cats. So part of me is fine with doing that, even though it did disrupt my work. So I immediately got on Airbnb, and I found an Airbnb, and I booked it for a month, and I paid for it for a month. And I thought, okay, that should give me sufficient time to see what's going on with the kitten. So I took the kitten back to to this new Airbnb. And then I immediately noticed the kitten had worms. And obviously I was going to take the kitten to the vet, but I realized I need to take the kitten to the vet ASAP. So the next day, I had called all the vets I could, and none of them had appointments. And finally I found one. It was called Austin Vet Care at Central Park that could fit me in. I told them, this is a really desperate situation. And they said, okay, we have an opening. So just come right now. So I came right then. And they had a look at the kitten. The vet was very nice. And he was like, this is really touch and go. This kitten is severely underweight and she can't regulate her temperature. So they wrapped her up in this towel and she just looked adorable with her little head poking out. And she seemed completely out of it at that point. I think the vet said she wasn't very responsive, and it was just because she was so malnourished and underweight. And he did a few tests, and he determined she had 3 different types of worms. So then I got all this worming medication, and it was, I can't remember exactly how many days the worming medication was for. I think it was for 8 days that I had to give her this worming medication. So I took her home and I kept her wrapped in a blanket like I was told to. And I started giving her this worming medication. And she was so good. She, because she couldn't regulate her weight. So she slept on me, and she loved being on me because obviously she was getting the heat from me. And very, very sweet kitten. And, initially the worming medication was fine, but I didn't see any response. And then once we were coming to the end of the medication, she really started to liven up a little bit. She was still very weak, but I could tell that it definitely had a big effect on her. And she was always eating very well. And so over, I think it was a period of 2 weeks, I got to know her very well. Very sweet kitten. She was always a little bit scared when you first entered the room. But as soon as she was with you for a little bit, she just completely relaxed. She let you touch her everywhere. She let you hold her paws. She slept beside me, as I said. She purred a lot. I used to hold her stomach and she would purr. Very sweet. It's really difficult to talk about her because she's no longer with us. So the events that happened once I had her was I started thinking, okay, so what am I going to do in terms of homing her when she is well? I have this 1 month leeway. I can also extend it. I can also take her with me after that 1 month because she'll be big enough to travel, and I won't be so worried about her. So I started trying to find out if I could home her, and I had one offer from someone who I just bumped into and was talking about the kitten, and they said, oh, I'd love her. And then I had another person who was not in Austin who wanted her, and I was thinking, okay, well, that's an option, but obviously she would have to travel, and I wasn't completely sure that was the best option. I thought the best option might be if I could find someone local. So at the vet, they recommended I get in touch with the Austin Humane Society again, and they might have mentioned somewhere else. And I already had experience with the Austin Humane Society, having got the cat trap from there. So I went back to the Austin Humane Society, emailed them and said, hi, I have this kitten. Can I find out more about your adoption program or something like that? And they immediately said, bring her in now for vaccines. And I said, oh, no, she's not ready at all to be brought in. She's taking this medication and the vet definitely doesn't think she's ready. And they said, okay, just email us when she's finished all that medication. So after about 2 weeks of having her, she seemed a little better. And I thought, okay, I can now get back in touch with the Austin Humane Society and find out more and see what she's ready for. I could take her in and get an assessment and get an idea from them and find out about their program. I also have these other options for adoption. So I had a few options. I also knew that the vet had told me that she needed to be wormed again after 3 weeks. So I had an appointment on the 24th of September for her to go back and get another round of worming treatment. So I was sure I was going to do that. And basically I had the Airbnb for the whole month of September to look after her in. And Austin Humane Society got back to me and they said, okay, why don't you bring her in on the 3rd of October? And I said, oh, can I bring her in before that just for an assessment? because I want to get just an idea of the timeline and everything. And they said, "Yep, sure, you can bring her in now." So I brought her in, and this is when it really, things happened that I was not expecting to happen, and I wouldn't imagine that a shelter or anyone who loves animals would ever behave this way. So I brought her in for an assessment, and immediately I felt something was not right. So before I brought her in, they asked me to fill out a form online to say what her temperament was. So I gave them that information, and I brought her in, and this woman came up to me and she was in a box. She just took her and walked off, and I followed her and I said, "What's going on?" And she just sort of ignored me and took her into another room and shut the door in my face. And I was thinking to myself at the time, because this is 2021 September, oh, is this a COVID regulation? Because I assumed I would be with my kitten during the assessment. I assumed it would be something like when you go to the vet. Generally they don't separate you from your kitten, or if they do, they explain what they're going to do and they explain them bringing it back. So they just took her. And I was kind of like a little bit in shock, and it was a very heavy metal door that they slammed in my face. And I was a bit like, wow, what's going on? So I sat down and I just thought, okay, I'll wait. They're going to come back out. So I was waiting there, and then a woman came out, and I believe I looked on the website afterwards, and I believe this woman was called Caitlin Kneff, and she was the shelter manager intake for feral cats and veterinary services. And so she came out and she said, "Yeah, we're going to take the kitten now." And I said, no. She's just here for an assessment. I'm for sure going to be looking after her for another few weeks. I knew she wasn't ready to go to the Austin Humane Society. She was still tiny. She's something like 6 weeks old. The vet identified her as, when I first took to the vet, he identified her as younger than that, but now it had been 2 weeks. She was about 6 weeks old. She was still very weak, even though she had taken this medication to get rid of the initial lot of worms. She was still very weak. She needed feeding up. She needed looking after, for sure in a home environment, for sure in a foster environment, or with her owner, me. And I was very happy to do it because I'd already booked and paid for the Airbnb till the end of September. And, the date I'd taken her to the Austin Humane Society was the 15th of September. So I still had a good amount of time. So I said to this woman, Caitlin, I believe she's called, I said, absolutely not. She needs to come home with me. And this woman started sort of arguing with me a little bit. And she said, but she meets weight requirements. She needs to stay. And I said, I'm sorry. I think you've misunderstood why I'm here. I'm just here for an assessment. And it's good to know that you think she's ready, but I don't. And I would like to be looking after her for at least till the end of September. And eventually she said, okay, I'll go and get her. And so she went back into this room with the heavy door, and the door was again shut in my face. I wasn't invited in, and I sat back down and waited, and was told she was going to bring the kitten out, and I was waiting to see her, my kitten, and but she never did. And then a second woman came out, and this woman, I believe, when I looked at the website, identified her as, from the photograph, as Sarah Hamill, shelter manager, adoption, animal care, and volunteer program. This woman came out, and she had a very different energy. Her energy was, "You're not taking this kitten." And I immediately told her the exact same thing I told the other woman. I just brought her here for an assessment. Can you please give her back to me? And she said, no, she meets the weight requirements. She has to stay. And I said, everything I said, she would just rebut. And eventually it became a bit of a shouting match. So, I said to her, no, she has, it's the 15th day. I have a vet appointment. I have to take her to on the 24th to worm her. This woman, Sarah, said, no, we're going to give her a 5-day worming treatment here. We have it all sorted out. And I said, no, she needs to spend more time with me. She's still very little and weak. And she said, no, she meets the weight requirements. So at this point, my kitten is under 2.5 lb, under that. So she's tiny. And so I said, I just kept pushing my point that I wanted to take her home. And this woman wouldn't let me. And she was physically very big and imposing. And she stood between the door there's the door, then there's her, then there's me. So there's no way I can't see the kitten, I can't get to the kitten, I can't just take her at all. I was never given that option. So I kept arguing with her, and to the point where this woman was just shouting over me. And everything I came up with, I said she needs to be in a home environment longer. And she even said, "Oh no, we have our own fosterers." And I was like, "But why would I, as the owner, want her to be fostered longer somewhere else? I'm very happy to keep looking after her. She's my kitten." But nothing I said made a difference, and she kept shouting me down. And at that point, I started to think, "Oh, what are my options here?" Like, she's not going to let me have the kitten back. She was point blank not going to let me have her. And I thought, could I call the police? Like, how is that going to go down? Like, that seems like a high risk situation, because surely they're going to believe the Austin Humane Society over like a person that's just come in, or maybe they won't. I don't know. I'm not from America, and I thought, oh, should I try and call a lawyer? But that seemed pretty unfeasible. I don't know any lawyers in town, and am I going to be able to find a lawyer in the next 5 minutes? I don't think so. So I just kept arguing with her, and eventually I thought, okay, I just need to get in the room to get to my kitten. So I said, "Can I at least go in the room to say goodbye to her?" And this woman, Sarah, said, "Yes, you can come in the room." So when I got in the room, she let me take the kitten out of this big metal cage they put her in, and I was holding her, and I was thinking, could I just try and run? But her carrier was not in the room, and she's very skittish, and there was a big metal door, and I didn't know what this woman was going to do if I tried to do that. And so I kept trying to argue with her. I kept saying I need to keep looking after her. She's mine. And this woman said, "No, she has to stay here now." And then very, very quickly after I'd been in the room, she's like, "You have to leave now. You have to leave." And so I honestly didn't feel like I had any other option at that point. So I left. I massively regret not leaving, and I wonder what I could have done. I mean, maybe I could have just screamed, but then I don't know what the outcome would have been for me or the kitten. Maybe they would have called the police on me. I'm not sure. But it was a very antagonistic situation. So that happened, and then I went home, and back to the Airbnb, and I just felt awful. This was on the 15th, and I spoke to my mother, who's a lawyer, and I spoke to other people, and they said, just go back and try and adopt the kitten. There's obviously something wrong with this place. It's very strange. So I went on the 17th with the intention just to figure out how I could just like formally adopt her from them, just to get her back, because they'd taken my kitten without my consent, hadn't signed any form or anything, believed I was taking her in for an assessment. Anyway, so at that point, I go back to the Austin Humane Society, and I think I got there around 3:30, and I said, where's my kitten? And they said, "Oh, she's being spayed." And I was like, it just hit me like, what? I couldn't believe a kitten that small, under 2.5 lb, who was, still sick. She still had another round of worming medication to go. And the vet had even told me they were worried about the fur on her skin. And so initially the vet had told me that she had a little bit of alopecia on her toes, but they said it wasn't ringworm. But when I went to the Austin Humane Society, the woman just read her records out, and she said she's being spayed right now. Oh, and she has suspected ringworm because she has more alopecia on her head and her toes. And so obviously the alopecia got worse. So she was more sick than, when I left her there on the 15th, and she was being spayed. So they said to me, don't worry, we're going to bring her out in the next hour. It was even the next half hour. She will have finished the spade surgery, and we're going to bring her out. So I was thinking, oh gosh, thank God, I can see her. I can see that she's okay. It's going to be all right. So I waited, and I kept asking, and they kept saying, they kept giving me excuses why they weren't bringing her out. So I waited and I waited, and I waited for 2 hours. And then they finally told me the surgery hadn't gone well. She wasn't recovering well from the surgery. That's what they said. So I was incredibly worried. I felt so upset and angry at myself that I'd ever let her get in this situation. I felt it was completely my responsibility, and it was. But I'd also felt very bullied. So I said to them, can you please update me what's going on? Because they said she was going to stay in this recovery room overnight and I wouldn't be able to see her or hear what was going on. So I went home, and then the next morning was the Saturday, I think, and Saturday the 18th. And I called them and I said, I'm adopting this kitten. I'd like to find out what her status is. And they said, oh, I'm so sorry. She hasn't recovered well. There was a lack of oxygen after the surgery, and she's not able to walk, and she's not able to see. She's blind now. So that hit me very hard. Obviously, I felt awful, and I said, I don't care what's wrong with her. I want to adopt her. She's my responsibility for life now. I've put her in this awful situation with these awful people that didn't care about her at all. Like, no reasonable qualified vet would have spayed a kitten, an undernourished kitten that young. So I said it to them on the phone, and I also sent them an email. So they had it in writing, and they said, we'll keep you up to date about her. They never called me. They never did that. So I just called them every day, a few times a day, to find out what was going on with her. And they did give me hope that she would recover. I think I spoke to them on the Sunday twice. I left messages. They said that she still couldn't stand up properly, and they thought she was going to be blind. And I said, can I play a recording of my voice? Because they wouldn't let me see her. So I said, can I play a recording of my voice and maybe she can listen to it at least? And they said no. And then on the 20th, which was the Monday, I believe, I telephoned them again, and they said, oh, we're very sorry. We didn't want to tell you yesterday, but she started having seizures. And so now we have to consider what's best for her, and in terms of whether she needs to be put down or not. And they said that they would take her to see a neurologist. So I was just waiting to hear back from them. And then on the Tuesday, I phoned them again, and they said, actually they sent me an email saying I could pick her up and adopt her. And then I got a phone call almost immediately afterwards saying, actually, we've changed our minds. Our Austin Humane Society vet has talked to another vet where she was taken to see a neurologist, and we decided she's going to be euthanized. And I was obviously very shocked, and I said, can I at least see her? I need to see her. I need to be with her when this happens. And they said, yes, that's fine. So they gave me the information for this vet that she was at. I believe it was Pet Specialists of Austin. So I immediately got an Uber, went straight there, went in, and I told them I was there to see the kitten, Roosevelt. And I waited. I waited quite a long time, and eventually they brought her out. This vet tech called April brought her to me, and I held her, and she seemed okay, and she seemed like she remembered me, and she was purring. She was purring the whole time. So she was purring, and then the vet tech April said to me, we need to take her back now because she's going to be euthanized. And I said, oh, no, I need to be there while she's being euthanized. And she said, no, you're not the owner. And I said, I am the owner. There's obviously been a mistake. And she said, no, Austin Humane Society is the owner, and they haven't given you permission to be there during her being euthanized. They've only given you permission to see her briefly before. Anyway, so I said, well, I'm not. I need to be there. I'm not. And I'd like to speak to the vet. They said, no, the vet doesn't have time to speak to you because you're not the owner. And I said, I'm also happy to pay for, another vet to get a second opinion. And they said, no. And they said, okay, you have to give her back now. And I said, no, I absolutely have to be there when she's euthanized. And they said, no. And then this vet tech April said she was going to call the police if I didn't give her back immediately. So I said, do whatever you need to do. And I held the kitten longer. And then at that point she had a seizure, and I immediately gave her back. And about 5 minutes after that, the police arrived, and they were actually very nice. But they said the vets have told me to leave, so I had to leave. And then they advised me to go to the Austin Humane Society, because I'd been calling the Austin Humane Society the whole time to try and get this permission to be there when she was euthanized, and they didn't pick up. And so the Austin Humane Society advised me to go immediately. Sorry, the police advised me to get a taxi and go to the Austin Humane Society. And so I did, and I got there, and then I waited a while in the reception, having told the receptionist, and then she just told me to wait longer. And I said no. And after like 20 minutes, I said, this is actually really important. Can I please speak to somebody about this? And at that point, I was taken to a room, and someone more senior came and spoke to me, and she said, your kitten is just being euthanized. And I said, why on earth couldn't I have been there? And she said, I don't know, miscommunication or something like that. And obviously I was very upset. And I said, how could you have done this to a kitten? Like, well, why didn't you give her proper medical care? Why didn't you monitor her oxygen after the surgery? And I wondered a lot about that, because I remember at the time she did the surgery, when I went into Austin Humane Society, the woman had said to me, there's a lot of cats getting spayed today. So I don't know if there was too many. I don't know. I don't know what happened, why she didn't get adequate medical care. Anyway, so at that point, the kitten was dead. I hadn't been able to be with her in her last moments, so that was very sad. And I have a lot of issues with how the Austin Humane Society handled it. I think the main issue was the way they just took her from me, and I hadn't consented to that. I think, I would feel very differently if I had, and I hadn't. And I think they have a lot of questions to answer. And I have been in touch with them, or tried to be in touch with them, and they haven't been helpful at all. I mean, they sort of pretend they're going to be helpful, and then they're not. So I'd really appreciate if anyone wants to contact them about the kitten. She was called Roosevelt, Rosabelle. And she was very, very sweet and very special. And I suppose the main things I have an issue with was, as I said, the fact that the Austin Humane Society was so strange in the way that they took the kitten, how they didn't accept what I said, that I just brought her there for assessment. And even just the kind of scary setup that they had, that they immediately took the kitten, immediately separated us, and wouldn't, so there was just no way I could leave with her. Like, it felt very calculated looking back. And it also felt like when one woman who was working there, I believe her name was Caitlin Kneff, said she would bring her back to me. Instead of doing that, another woman, a more aggressive woman, Sarah Hamill, I believe her name was, came out and, was almost like the bad cop, was like, no, absolutely not. It seemed like they had a system. And for me, it was very strange, because I didn't go in there thinking, oh, this is going to be an antagonistic situation. I went in thinking, okay, these people love animals. They'll just give me a little bit of advice. Really all I was looking for at that point. And I wasn't mentally set up for a fight. And if I had been, I would have acted completely different. If I'd known, I would never have gone there. But if I'd even had an inkling, I would have just would have gone with a lot more strength. Like, I'd been looking after a kitten, nursing a kitten for 2 weeks. And when I went there just to get advice, and I feel like they were quite brutal in the way they wouldn't return her to me under any circumstances, it felt like. And the fact that the vet later on called the police on me makes me think, oh gosh, if I had tried hard, I kick myself constantly about not having tried harder, but I tried the hardest. But if I just screamed, or if I'd done something crazy to run out with the kitten, I'm wondering, would they have called the police on me then? I don't know. So it was a very difficult situation. I have been in touch with the Austin Humane Society, and they hired a lawyer, a very expensive lawyer, to sort of deal with me. Or so I mean, the idea that it's like they're very cash strapped and they had to behave this way, and they had to space such a young sick kitten because they had a resource issue. It's just cannot be true. If they suddenly can shell out for this expensive lawyer who I believe is a partner of a big law firm in Austin, who they must be paying, must have paid thousands and thousands of dollars to at this point just to communicate with me, because they don't want to communicate with me directly anymore. I did ask for a number of changes. I asked if they would change their intake procedure. I asked if they would please not separate the owner from the kitten. And they said, no, they can't do that because they have to assess the kitten's behavior without the owner there. And I said that, well, can there at least be documents which I don't accept at all. I don't think you need to separate them in a different room. I feel like cats are sort of different. You can see how they'll behave towards you, even if the owner's there. And I asked if they could at least have some documents that you would have to sign to show that you consented to leaving the animal there, which I was never asked to sign anything. So it was sort of a bit in shock at the way it all happened. But I did ask for those changes. I asked to confirm the names of the 2 staff members I dealt with. And they claim that those weren't the correct staff members, but then they say they cannot tell me who the staff members are. So I hesitate to not believe them, because I did identify these women immediately after from the photographs on the website. And I wanted to know the vet's name who did the procedure, and they wouldn't tell me that. And I wanted to know exactly what happened with this kind of medical negligence, I believe, in terms of not monitoring her oxygen level after the surgery. They wouldn't give me any information about that. So pretty much they said, oh, we're going to be helpful, but then no to absolutely everything you're asking. So I guess if anyone wants to help, I know that Austin Humane Society gets a lot of money from sponsors because I'm on their mailing list. They mail constantly. They have big businesses sponsoring them. They get sponsorship from a lot of different places. And I don't think they're run in the way that they claim that they're run. I don't think they're run in a very humane way, and definitely not considering the kittens. I spent some time on their website. So they claim to be a no-kill shelter, and I think that's a really significant point. They're a no-kill shelter, but they still have quite a high death rate. So even if a shelter is no-kill, there's certain things they can do that will result in the death of animals. One thing is on their website. It says that, I can't remember which year this was for, but they have a table that says 78 cats were euthanized a year. And that's 74 in a year died or were lost in the shelter care. I don't know how that many animals could be lost in their shelter. And 17 cats were unhealthy and untreatable. So in other words, that they do end up losing, I suppose, euthanizing a lot of cats, even though they claim to be a non-kill shelter. So to them, I don't think this was a big deal. I don't think it was very significant to them what happened to this kitten. To me, it was massively. I think that maybe they slipped up in that, they just did it to the wrong person who would be willing to really make a complaint. I wrote complaint letters to them. I got heavily involved with it. I'm trying to put this information out there because I want people to know about it and read about it. And I really want changes to be made. Anyway, thanks so much for watching.